So, Collette, what have you been called too much of? Can you list it for me, please?
Yeah, I've been called too quiet, too loud, just generally too much, too assertive, too accommodating, just generally too much without articulating. And people just like, or too much, a bit much is the other one as well.
Yeah, and can you tell us some anecdotes or about when you've been called these things, the context, who said it, how it made you feel, whether it affected you?
Yeah, so I think where I've been called too much is at times where potentially I was in situations or maybe in the workplace where I was in roles where my face didn't fit, where I was quite different from other people in the organisation or in the company. So when I worked in advertising, I remember a specific example. I was having my appraisal and my line manager said, some of the clients think that you're a little bit too assertive. Except all of my clients had copied me on their feedback, and no one had said that. So when she said this to me, I said, so sorry, which clients exactly? And she was like, oh, I couldn't name names. I said, no, seriously, because all of my clients blind copied me into the feedback that you got, and no one said that. So unless they followed up with you separately, and I'd really like to hear what it was. And then she admitted that it wasn't the clients that said I was too much or too assertive. It had been the agency, her specifically. I was too assertive for her, and and that I guess is where previously I'd been called too much or too anything. It felt quite humiliating, and maybe you feel immediately a bit embarrassed or maybe like, okay, well, I need to do differently then, or even annoyed with yourself. At that point, I thought, no, this is you. And therefore, from then onwards, I think that was the point at which I was like, okay, where people say too much, this is too much for them. And actually, it's not a universal view, it's their view and their opinion. And it's for me to work out whether this is a valid opinion and whether there's any evidence in that or not. And that's exactly what I did. And I was like, actually, and immediately then called it and said, no, it's not a thing in that. And that's what I do now.
So if you could think of all the things you listed that you're called too much of,
Yeah.
how are they actually your power?
Yeah.
What do you love about them?
So,
how has that helped you, helped other people?
So now I run my own business called Brand by Me. And I've actually made, I think, 2 of my brand personality traits, which is all about how I do stuff and how Brand by Me we do stuff, were actually things that potentially have been called too much. So I was always called too direct is something I've been called as well, too direct. So one of my brand personality traits is straightforward, because now it's a massive strength. In a field where there's a lot of waffle and a lot of jargon, the fact that I'm just straightforward and upfront with people is a massive strength. Even in that example I gave where the agency had said too assertive, maybe. My client said the exact opposite. They said, we love the fact that you're so direct with us. We love the fact that you're upfront with us because we always know where we are. And particularly so the fact of maybe people might say too direct in an English context or in the UK, but I do global roles now, and actually that idea of being direct is so useful when English is not people's first language, because again it makes it easier for you to be understood. So yeah, that's an example where, from being told you were too direct or too assertive, it's now one of my biggest strengths. It's what I've built my business off of, and it's one of the ways that I really stand out from other businesses in my field. The other one that is too much is sometimes maybe, and I can't remember the too much version of this, but maybe it's a sense too much. This is about the energy and exuberance that I bring. And obviously people wouldn't say it in that way. They just be like, oh, it's a bit much. Maybe when you're doing a workshop, sometimes it's a bit much. But now again, one of my other brand personality traits is with energy that lights up the room. Because actually, and again, it's one of my strengths in that often I was with a client today, and when you're trying to introduce new stuff, it's really useful if you have immediate energy and just upbeatness and fun and this sense of everything that maybe people would have thought was a bit much or too much, too loud. is that energy that lights up a room. That again is a reason why people really love the workshops that I run. It's because I can go in and very quickly get the energy in the room up, and you can like when you sit in the room, you can feel it lift. So you can feel that sense of energy, even if people are a bit tired at first. You can just feel the energy, and everyone, by the end of the workshops I run, people walk out, everyone's talking a bit faster and more animated, and that's me, because that's the stuff that's what I do. I'm like, people say you talk too much, you talk too loudly, you talk too fast, but actually that's exactly what people do at the end of my workshops, because that's about being energetic and animated, and that proves that you're really excited about what you do. And so again, from something that people have said is a weakness to now just the way I do things, you've just got to own it. Really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, that leads nicely on to the next question, which is, if someone in their early teens came to you and said they've been called all the things that you've been called too much of, and they said, do you have any advice? What do I do? I
would say, really, I think the biggest thing you can do is when someone says too much, you need to add 2 words, for me. That's the biggest thing, because when you say it's too much for me, so too quiet for me, and by me, not me meaning myself, meaning that person. If you add those 2 words, it massively changes the impact of it, because actually, if I say you're too quiet for me, it means you think, oh well, never mind, not for most people, just for you. And so then you have a choice about whether you spend time with those people or whether, and I guess that would be the one bit of advice. Beyond that, and I think that would be the biggest thing, because actually for us, I think we're the ones that internalize it. We're the ones that make it part of who we are. We're the ones that in response to that might lessen ourselves. If you add for me, it becomes a person's subjective opinion, and it's much easier to react by just saying, no, that's not a thing, or then actually if that's that person, maybe other people don't feel that. And that's what I would say. Add those 2 words, for me. And then I guess the other explicit advice, although this is really hard, I know, for people to do, is just don't worry about it. Just literally just think, psh, don't worry. Do not worry about it. And that's something my little sister's a lot younger than me. And so when she was a teenager, I used to say this to her all the time. Just don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. And someone told me this in my first job, if you can, where someone is like that and they're constantly telling you too much, do something in your own mind that means they have less power. So one of the things I do, and I've done it throughout my career, is give people really silly names. So I had a client, I'm going to have to change the name, but I had a client that was really undermining and quite bullying when I worked in advertising, and her name was Millicent. And my friend said, right, from now on, her name is Mildew. And we called her Mildew. And so every time, and it made it so much easier when this woman's like this, sort of, when she's just on the fact of me speaking. If I think of her, I think, well, you're Mildew. It just made it so much easier, and it made us all laugh. And we're like, stupid old Mildew. And I do it all the time now with people. It's this very silly and childish thing, but it immediately it's a way of just lessening people's power. Yeah. Or saying, or this, or saying, and it's not to say, it sounds really silly, but like, if someone's saying something to you or being really critical or saying, again, you're too much, but they have a role of when they're saying it, when they're undermining you, really screwing up their face, you can just in your head, I used to do this again with another colleague, and we called it the face, and they said, we were like, this person was doing the face, and we do it ourselves like this. And it just made us, and then it made us laugh and feel loads better. And then when you're confronted by that face in meetings, it doesn't make you falter or make you think, or make you feel not confident. You just laugh. You kind of not. You don't laugh explicit. You don't laugh outside, but you laugh inwardly to yourself. Think, oh, there's that face again, and you come to preempt it. So you're like, when we knew that in this organisation, if we were talking about a certain subject, that face would come out for a group of people because they just didn't like it. They didn't like being told it. They didn't like it being told it by 2 women. So that face would come up. And so we just do the face and we're like, did you see the face? How many of the face did you spot? And it's just, again, by laughing at stuff, and finding ways to laugh at stuff and making yourself laugh in your head, however silly it is, silly names or faces, it just makes it a lot easier to just dismiss. And that's the art, is the final thing, is just going, actually, it doesn't matter, so just dismiss it. And if you need to have tools and techniques, and these are silly ones, but I told my sister them. I was like, I call them mildew. You know, that sort of thing, it really works and it helps.
Yeah.
And that's one of them.
Yeah, that's great. And if you could change the world tomorrow, anyway, it could be completely different, what would you change?
I think overnight I would create a ceiling of how much one person could earn or how much wealth one person could hold, and just distribute it immediately, because I think, you know, I would. And then I'd have, yeah, it's anything, isn't it? So that's what I would do. But then I would also have a penalty system where there'd be some behaviours. So if someone abused that they would act. It'd be like a computer game where if you, like Sonic the Hedgehog, where he's running, and if he gathers rings as he's going and it's fine, if he hits something, hits a barrier, immediately you lose all your rings. It's the same thing. If you demonstrate any behaviours, immediately there's a thing that you just lose all your money immediately. You have no money, no power, that's it. Back to square one again. And so that's it. There's a ceiling in terms of how much you earn, and as you're gathering it, if you demonstrate certain behaviours, no, back to square one, because I feel that would be, I think it all starts with money's power, so if you distribute that more effectively. And I know it sounds super communist, because that's why I think you have, but I think you have to invent, that's what I said, you have to invent something that immediately, and it's automatic. So there's like, where people are demonstrating certain behaviours, that means immediately you just lose all that immediately. There's no ifs or buts around it or grey area. No, there's just a few common, a few core things that if you do these things, you lose all your money and power immediately. I don't know how, but you said one thing, that's what I would do. I mean, it doesn't exist, but I'm a big fan of science fiction, so I feel quite strongly that at some point that will exist. Yeah. And that we can create and invent that.
What would be the things, the behaviours that would send people back to square one?
Obviously, the obvious things like, abuse and murder and violence. I then think also corruption. So I think if you've got a shared sense of, if you have agreed some certain rules and then you're trying to use that money to circumvent them, immediately that, I think they'd be the three. So, obviously the kind of violence towards other people, under any circumstances, because then it wouldn't need to be self-defense. Yeah, I think corruption, so if people sought to imbalance that power in any way as well, I think they'd be the things. I mean, there'd probably be others, but they'd have to be shared and agreed. But I think they'd be the two biggies that you just go, nah, okay, you lose all your money then on this case.
Yeah. So is there anything else you would like to share?
I saw this really brilliant, I saw it on Instagram actually, and it was from Beyonce's mum. And she said, so Beyonce had just done her amazing Coachella performance where she'd drawn on loads of sort of references from Black college culture and Black power and ancient Egypt and all sorts of things. And she said, Beyonce's mum had said to her, aren't you worried that Coachella, which is like a white dance festival, aren't you worried that people just won't get it and won't engage? And I'll read it because it's really good. Beyonce said, and this is what Beyonce's mum said. She said, her brave response to me made me feel a bit selfish and ashamed. Beyonce said, I have worked very hard to get to the point where I have a true voice. And at this point in my life and career, I have a responsibility to do what's best for the world and not what's most popular. And I loved it because that's exactly what we all should be saying now, is like, actually, I fought hard to find my true voice. And actually now it's my responsibility to share that in a way that's good for the world. And that's what I think. That's the one thing I'd like to say.
That's brilliant.
Let's all do that.